everyone, I'm Cynthia and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making a North Carolina pulled pork in the Instapot, and that's going to come with a vinegar barbecue sauce as well as some barbecue seasoning. And to top it all off, we're going to make a Memphis style coleslaw so that way we can make some pulled pork sandwiches. Let's get started. First, we're going to make the vinegar barbecue sauce so that way it can stay in the refrigerator for 24 hours and mix up nice and well. It can also stay in the refrigerator for up to 2 weeks or even in the freezer for a little bit longer than that, up to 6 months. So that way you can have this sauce available anytime you're ready to make some barbecue. Okay, so for the Carolina vinegar barbecue sauce, we're going to add 2 cups of apple cider vinegar. Then we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup of ketchup, and add 2 tablespoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of black pepper, and 1 tablespoon of red pepper flakes. Then we're going to give it a stir and add some water. We're going to add about 1.5 cups of water. So I'm going to label this vinegar barbecue sauce with the date that we made it, and I'm going to put it in the fridge at least for 24 hours for up to 2 weeks, or in the freezer for up to 6 months. And it's important to put the date on it so that way you know when you made it and there's no guesswork. And then when the 24 hours is up, the next day we're going to start our barbecue seasoning and start cooking that pork. So now we're going to make the barbecue seasoning that we're going to rub all over the pork before we put it in the Instapot. Okay, so to make the homemade barbecue seasoning, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of celery salt, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of dry mustard, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I like to use the Himalayan pink salt, but you can use whatever kind of salt you'd like. Now we're going to give that a quick little stir. So I have my pork butt here. I have about 1 pound, but this recipe can make up to 3 pounds of pork butt. This recipe says to cut the pork into some large chunks. This does not have any bone in it, however, but if yours does, you can cook it with the bone or without. It's your preference. You're only going to need to cook it in the pressure cooker for about an hour. Before we put the seasoning onto the pork that's been cut, we're going to add some liquid smoke. You can either use mesquite, hickory, or any other kind of liquid smoke that you find. Today I'm going to be using mesquite though because that's one of my favorites. Pour 2 teaspoons of this right onto the pork. Next we're going to take our seasoning and we're going to sprinkle it all over the pork. And we're going to give it a good rub in. Make sure we get all that flavor in there. Now we're going to move to the Instapot. We're going to start with 1.5 cups of the vinegar barbecue sauce that we made yesterday or last week or whenever you made it. But it has to be at least 24 hours. So go ahead and pour in the 1.5 cups of the vinegar barbecue sauce. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and add my meat right on top. Now we're going to go ahead, put the lid on and get it started on high pressure for a full hour. When the hour is up, we're going to let it cool naturally for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're going to do a quick release of pressure after that. Let's go make some coleslaw. So to get started on our classic Memphis style coleslaw, we're going to need about 2 cups of cabbage, which is also about a 16-ounce bag that you can buy in the grocery store. I like to cut up my own cabbage because it's a little bit more cost effective, but you can also use the bag kind if that's what you prefer. We're only going to need about a half a head of cabbage, I would say. So first we're going to take out the stem that's inside of the cabbage because you don't want to eat that part. Okay, and it says that we need to have it finely shredded, so I just like to cut it in thin strips, and that's basically shredded right there. Doesn't take any time at all. So I have my measuring bowl there. I'm going to put this in here and see if it comes up to about 2 cups, which is about there. Now we're going to add all of the other ingredients into this bowl, mix it up, and then we're going to mix it in with the cabbage. So one thing that you want to be careful of when you're making things with vinegars or sauces or spices, you want to make sure that they have gluten-free on the label, or you want to check specifically with the company about whether or not they have safe practices for people who have allergies to wheat, celiac disease, or people who have a sensitivity to gluten. Vinegar is something that is not always gluten-free, so you need to be careful because sometimes they'll make vinegar with wheat. So you need to check with the manufacturer and make sure that the vinegar that they're making is coming from another substance such as corn. Also with spices, sometimes they like to make them on shared lines with wheat, and if you're really sensitive or if you have an allergy like me, that's really important to pay attention to, so that way you can stay safe and make sure that you don't get sick or your guests don't get sick. Alright, so let's finish up our coleslaw. Okay, so we're gonna add 1 cup of mayonnaise to our bowl, 2 tablespoons of the Dijon mustard, 2 tablespoons of the apple cider vinegar, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 2 teaspoons of celery seeds. Okay, when that's incorporated, we're going to go ahead and add the cabbage. Okay, so now we're going to let this sit in the refrigerator for about an hour. You can also leave this in the refrigerator for up to 2 days. So the pressure has been released from our Instapot. We're going to go ahead and take the meat out and we're going to shred it and then build our sandwiches. Look at that fall apart. And then to break it apart, you just kind of go like this, or you can even take 2 forks to do it, but really it's so tender that it doesn't even really need the forks to shred it up. Now that that's mixed, we're going to go ahead and take some of the leftover liquid that's from the pot and just add a touch back in, just to give it a little bit more touch of that flavor that we cooked into it earlier. Okay, so our cabbage is nice and chilled from the refrigerator, as you can see. I went ahead and added a bit more of the shredded cabbage to mine because I like it a little bit more thicker, but you can add as little or as much cabbage as you'd like. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this plated up. Okay, so to plate this up, I'm going to use Char Ciabatta gluten-free bread. I love this bread because it's nice and fluffy, and it's got a really nice texture to it. This is what it looks like, all nice and done. Nice and delicious with a soft bun and some delicious barbecue. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already, and make sure to subscribe so that way you can tune in whenever I post another delicious recipe. Thanks for joining me today on this episode. I was not sponsored doing this, but if you would like to, please just send me a message and I'll definitely get back to you. Thanks, see you later.